The forest fell silent. Vine, a trembling omega with wide, terrified eyes, crouched behind a massive tree. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and her delicate frame shivered, both from the cold and the fear running through her veins. The hunters were close. She could hear their heavy boots crunching against the fallen leaves, their malicious laughter taunting her. She's just an omega, one of them scoffed, the sound sending chills down her spine. It will be an easy catch. Wine knew better than to scream. Her alpha, Jungkook, had warned her against it. His territory was feared by all, but hunters were arrogant and foolish. They thought they could trespass without any consequences. Her heart pounded as she darted to another tree, hoping to get more distance between herself and the hunters. But she wasn't fast enough. She was already injured because of running. Now she waited. She knew her alpha was going to find her no matter what. She was just having her time, while suddenly she landed in the eyes of the hunters, who were now after her for their own fun. There she is. Before Vine could react, a rough hand grabbed her arm and yanked her backward. She let out a sharp cry, struggling against the hold, but another hunter appeared, pinning her against the tree. Stop fighting, little Omega. The man sneered, his breath hot and pressed against her cheek. You're only making this harder for yourself. Tears filled her eyes as she thrashed, her nails clawing at the bark of the tree. The hunters laughed at her desperation, their voices full with cruel amusement. She hated it. Anger started to boil inside of her as she tried to claw her nails against them, but it seemed like they were ready for it. It seemed like they were trained enough to handle a wolf. They dodged it easily, and one of them hit her legs while the back of the rifle. The impact was quite strong and painful for her. You think your Alpha's going to save you? Where is he now? Huh? Another mocked, grabbed her face roughly. The pain and fear were overwhelming, but never once she stopped believing in her Alpha. A low growl rumbled through her forest, so deep it seemed to vibrate the ground beneath their feet. The hunters froze. The mocking smirks on their faces faltered as they exchanged uneasy glances. Out of the shadows stepped Jungkook, his presence as deadly as the sharp glint in his dark eyes. Clad in black, his broad shoulders and towering frame radiated dominance, his wolf barely restrained beneath his skin. He tilted his head, his sharp jawline catching the faint glow of the moon. Jungkook, this territory is mine, he said in a voice as cold as ice. Jungkook, and this Omega is mine as well. He growled before the hunters could react. Jungkook moved with inhuman speed. The one holding wine was the first to meet his wrath. Jungkook's claw tore through him in a swift, brutal motion, sending him crumpling to the ground. The next moment, he tore the man into two pieces, detaching his head from the body. Wine turned to another side, not much fun of violence, and such gruesome things. The others screamed out of horror. The second hunter tried to draw his weapon, but Jungkook was faster. He grabbed the man's wrist, snapping it effortlessly before plunging in the claws in his chest. The man let out a strangled cry before gasping, blood pooling beneath him. Jungkook, you thought you could touch her? He growled, his voice laced with venom as he turned up to the remaining hunters. The man attempted to run, but Jungkook was on him in seconds. He dragged the hunter back by his collar, slamming him into a tree with enough force to put a crack on it. The man's scream echoed through the forest as Jungkook's claws ripped into him mercilessly. The last hunter fell to his knees, trembling as he begged for mercy, but Jungkook showed none. With a swift, calculated strike, he entered the man's bleeding, leaving his lifeless body to slump to the ground. The forest was silent again, except for Wine's irregular breaths. Jungkook turned to her, his expression softening instantly. It was crazy how those murderous eyes turned so soft within a second. He crossed the distance between them in a heartbeat, his hands cupping her face gently. Jungkook, are you hurt? She shook her head, her hands clutching his shirt as tears streamed down her face. Wine was so scared. Jungkook pulled her into his chest, his arm wrapping around her protectively. Jungkook, they'll never touch you again, he promised, his voice low but filled with so much anger. Anger at being later, anger at those men who dared hurt her, anger at so much reasons. He treated the scratch on his leg and took her in his embrace again, so tight and warm it absorbed all her fear, leaving her calm and relaxed in his strong arms. He pressed a tender kiss to her forehead before picking her up in his arms. Jungkook, I'll make sure nothing like this ever repeats, Luna. Wine smiled, completely trusting him even after such attack, and yet he came to save her uninformed. Wine snuggled her face in the crook of his neck. Jungkook, don't look at me with those eyes, he said while walking back to his home. Wine, what eyes? He growled and took back her lips. Jungkook ordered his men to have these body parts hung before the entrance of the territory, so no one hunter dared enter there. He wanted to make sure his territory was a safe place for his Luna. Where she could play, run, or do whatever she wanted without any fear. This was the kind of place owned by him. Snowy forest, tall trees, and entrance covered with the bodies and blood. It gave off the vibes of something straight out of a haunted movie. But inside, in the heart of it, were a lot of big homes. It was bright at night with lights shining brightly. His huge pack would most have the dinner out under the sky, and almost every night felt like a festival. It was one huge family where Wine found her home.